I'll go ahead and introduce myself now. I'm Valerie Hill, also known as Val Librarian in the Metaverse, and I work here in Second Life at the Community Virtual Library. There's some slides over there to the left about that. And CVL supports the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium. My research for the past 15 years has centered on changing literacy and the exploration of the metaverse for learning, particularly for libraries. As more and more of our time is spent online, the rise for the need to understand digital citizenship has become apparent for us all, even for young children. During my research journey, I came upon the term meta-literacy. I didn't invent that word. It was coined by Thomas Mackey and Trudy Jacobson. Meta-literacy is a reframing and a reinvention of information literacy that supports the production and sharing of information and associated responsibilities, such as informed research and ethical participation in collaborative spaces. And that's from Mackey and Jacobson's 2011 and 2014 articles. Here's the cited article, Meta-literacy, Reinventing Information Literacy to Empower Learners. Now, in other words, meta-literacy simply means thinking about our literacy, thinking about how it's changed. It's not just books anymore. Thinking about all the various platforms that we evaluate, choose, and utilize for communication on our digital devices and with our online and metaverse communities. I'm using meta-literacy right now with this local chat, and all of you are on whatever intake you are on your devices. Now, with our phones in our pockets today, we can access information live 24/7. News, email, research. We can access communities across the globe. Instant messages, text messages, Skype, and a plethora of apps. This fast pace can lead to information overload. I believe symbolic modeling is perfect for this type of subject, but as Marley said, it's suitable for any subject. If you were a teacher of math or science or agriculture, anything. But for me, literacy is my background. So I'm going to be asking Namara to build a symbolic model on the topic of meta-literacy using prims, textures, colors, whatever she chooses. And this is for her to represent how she feels about her own literacy process, particularly in digital culture. So Namara, I want you to consider how you intake information and how you produce with information. No longer, as I said, are print materials, books, and writing with a pen or pencil our primary literacy tools. They are not. We're mostly using digital tools. So consider these questions, and then you can start building whenever you're ready. Think about what type of learner you are mostly. Are you auditory, visual, textual, multimedia? And as you think about how formats are constantly changing with all these new applications for communication, is it easy for you or is it difficult to keep up with all the new apps emerging and the evolving media formats? And also consider, how do you correspond with others? Do you use email, text messages, the virtual world platforms primarily, social media, phone calls, Skype, or through other technology apps? Coding, 3D building. Think about all the ways that you can communicate. Now, while she's building, I'll share a blog post that you can look at later that's on the metaliteracy.org site, so you can learn a bit more about it. And I'll let her continue building. I might also, this is from the blog, I might just let you know a little bit more about their initial research. Their initial research concluded that meta-literacy promotes critical thinking and collaboration in a digital age, providing a comprehensive framework to effectively participate in social media and online communities. And think about how much time we're doing that. How much time we spent communicating in online spaces rather than mailing a letter through the post office. Metaliteracy is a unified construct that supports the acquisition, production, and sharing of knowledge in collaborative online communities, like where we are right now. Metaliteracy challenges traditional skills-based approaches to information literacy by recognizing related literacy types and incorporating emerging technologies. So as a librarian and a teacher of literacy, this has totally changed how we teach literacy. We don't start with a book and a pencil anymore. And as I said, I think the term metaliteracy aligns well to the communication tools that we use right here in a virtual world. While she's building, you might picture where you are when you're producing and consuming information. I've done a few symbolic modeling builds using this topic of metaliteracy, and over on InfoLit Island, some of you know Sheila Weber, who's a professor at the University of Sheffield in England. She has several metaliteracy symbolic models on display because I think it's a great way to get people to think about their relationship with changing literacy.
Okay, Val, I'm ready for exploration anytime you are.
Great, Namara is done, so we're going to start here and take a look at her build. And so I am going to ask you today to start thinking about this and look at your build. And I see a lot of different things here. Would you like to look at your build here? And I see several colors and several shapes. Would you like to start by choosing a color or a shape that you're drawn to right now to speak to?
Yeah, the orange curlicues.
Great. Would you like to be the orange curlicues, or would you like to speak to them?
I'll be the orange curlicues.
Okay.
I am orange curlicues, and I am part of the whole idea of content creation and processing of information, pulling data together. Namara can't do without me.
So Nam, what do you can't do without the curlicues? How do they impact you? What do you mean you can't do without, or Namara can't do without you?
Namara can't do without me. You cannot do without me, is my comment to Namara. You can't do without me. I am sustenance. I am Cheetos and cookies and water and coffee and tea and all of those things that keep you going while you process all this data and make sense out of all the information.
Okay, so I hear you saying that's your sustenance. How does that make you feel to not be able to do without those curlicues? How do you feel about that?
I feel appreciative and resentful at the same time. I think you call yourself comfort food, but often you're just junk and you cloud my brain function instead of clarifying it. I like it better when you are water and salad versus Cheetos and iced coffee.
So how do these curlicues relate to another object here? Could the curlicues speak to some other object that you could choose to see a relationship?
Sure. The curlicues can turn to the blue and white object. We are partners in this, and I'm glad that you are the foundation of our information processing and content creation. And the blue object, I know it would say, I am the bedrock, I am the foundation. Without me, there wouldn't be the amount and ease of access to all that data that's out there. And so while I continue to pump that information out, I know you, Orange Cheetos, will keep feeding the imagination. And me, as poor Nam sits out here and goes, I'm stuck in a loop, aren't I?
Well, the curly cues you mentioned are your sustenance. They look like those Cheetos. Could the blue object tell it's a little bit about its shape and what it's doing? Could you speak as the blue object and tell us about yourself?
I am a stripped down piece of technology. I represent computers and cell phones and tablets and all of the electronics that allow access to and store a wealth of data and information. Nam, you know all those articles you collect and haven't time to read? Well, I've got them here for you. You know all those books that you have piled up on my hard drive? They're still here for you.
I thought that might look like a laptop, but I didn't want to assume. Now, what about these arrows? I see some shape that reminds me of an arrow. Could you let the arrows speak or talk to your other objects?
Sure. The large arrow. I am everything that comes in. I take everything, all the disparate pieces of data and even information represented or, filtered through these colorful balls. I dump all of this into your lap, Namara, and you get to process it. And out of all of what I dump on you, you create these little bits of pointed content that goes into, my friends, the electronics as you reach for an orange Cheeto.
I know I heard a little emphasis, and your choice of word was interesting. Dump. How do you feel about that word dump?
I use dump because often it's overwhelming. The amount of stuff, and I'm just going to call it stuff, the amount of stuff that's out there. It feels different to me on a daily basis than the hours upon hours I spent hidden in the stacks reading books and journals and publications, or as a kid sitting in Walden Books, for example, or some local community bookstore and just sitting in the aisle on the floor and reading. And that arrow feels to me as overwhelming as all the data I see when I turn on my computer. So anyway, I think I said it.
How does that feeling of being overwhelmed, does that relate in any way to these colored balls? Would you like to speak to the colored balls or choose one?
The colored balls as a whole, we are all the disparate pieces of information, data, content available to you. And we stay close to the funnel through which it is all given to you. And you can absorb us all at once, or you can tease us apart and go piece by piece. But there's a lot of us out here.
How do you align them with that overwhelming feeling? Are they part of that?
They unwittingly get funneled into that. And so we encourage you, Namara, to continue to tease us out and find the pieces that are relevant and ignore the clutter. And the funnel will become more targeted and less overwhelming. That's our message to you.
Okay, so I wonder if you could could have those balls speak a bit. I mean, can they help you with that feeling of being overwhelmed in some way? What do the colored balls want to say about that?
So the blue ball, I am all the environmental, sustainability, regenerative living, permaculture information and data. Only look at me tomorrow when you are writing about or facilitating a discussion about me. Ignore the others. I probably could do that for each of the balls, but that's how I, as Namara, feel about them.
Yeah, I wonder if you could share a little more about how the feeling of being overwhelmed. Are the balls helpful with that because in some way to help you cope with that feeling of being overwhelmed?
Yes, they can be if I listen to the balls individually. So I think of the large arrow as being overwhelming in that it all comes in at once. So looking at the individual parts makes it easier for me to identify what is important and what can be put on hold and what can be disregarded altogether. So I just have to share this real quick, and I hope Marley doesn't get upset with me. She said, be the arrow. And I say this so often to folks I work with, be the arrow. Okay, I'm going to sit on the arrow if I can, and be the arrow. I am like the ticker tape at the New York Stock Exchange. I am all the voices yelling the trades. I am unfiltered. It is your responsibility to sort things out.
I noticed when you said that, your responsibility. You used the word dump and you used unfiltered and your responsibility. I wonder if that all relates to each other, that responsibility. How do you feel about that responsibility to sort out the unfiltered?
That's why it's overwhelming. My responsibility is to identify what's valuable and what isn't, and that's not always easy. So I reach for another Cheeto.
I love the Cheetos. All right, you told us a bit about the blue ball, and could you tell us a little bit that made sense? Would you like to choose another ball and just give us an example? I wonder what one of those other balls have to say.
I'm the yellow ball. My relationship with the other balls is that I am another container of information. I represent the daily life stuff for you, Nam. I'm the electronic bills that hit your inbox. I'm the incessant, insidious text messages that get sent by the insurance companies. And I know you want to ignore me, but these things are important. And while I try not to overwhelm you, I often become part of the flow. Sorry about that, kiddo.
When you said you want to ignore me, so how do you feel about that when there's one of these balls and you kind of want to ignore them? What can you tell us what that feels like?
You know me too well. But I know that you're an important part of the information flow into my life. And so I do pay attention. And you know I take care of my responsibilities. But you don't have to remind me 4 times that my meds are ready to be picked up.
As you're looking at the different objects you have here in your build, I'm just wondering if there's anything that surprised you when you were thinking about your own personal experience with metaliteracy.
You know, I joke around with friends about how I miss independent bookstores and picking up the newspaper because it's all electronic now. And in my home, I have stacks of books. And I think about, oh, I'm such an old timer. I'm such an old timer. And the reality is, and what surprised me was, I'm not. In reality, I'm pretty good at navigating the streams of information that come in. And yes, sometimes it's overwhelming and sometimes it's unwelcome. But I think it's exciting. I find I'm more excited about having access to all of that than I realized. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's that excitement. Does that kind of balance out that initial feeling that you stated of being overwhelmed?
Yes, because it gives me the opportunity to temper the overwhelm and sift through what needs to be sifted through. I mean, I'd like to think I'm pretty good at identifying what's important versus what isn't. Yes, so I think there is a balance. Yes, and I appreciate being able to discover that.
Wonderful. Now we're going to hand the microphone to Marley. So Marley, I'll give the mic to you.